So good to see you. Welcome to the beautiful campus of Reading Area Community College and, of course, the elegant Miller Center. My name is Susan Looney, and I'm the very proud president here at RAC. For those of you who've been to RAC before, of course, we welcome you back. But for those of you who are new to the campus, I'd like to share just a few facts that you may not know. Reading Area Community College is the largest higher education institution in Berks County with over 8,500 students. We are a proud Hispanic-serving institution with over 41% of our students self-designating as Latino. We are extremely affordable at about $6,000 a year for tuition for full-time students. About 40% of our students live here in the city of Reading, and 90% of our graduates stay here in Berks County. So we truly are the community's college. We are honored to host tonight's Community Resources and Collaboration Town Hall, and it is my pleasure to introduce Representative Chrissy Houlihan.
So literally, as I'm stepping up on the stage, my phone rings and my fire alarm is going off in my house, in my kitchen, and my husband is supposed to not be home right now. So I'm hoping that that's not him cooking something or whatever, but those are the kinds of things that seem to happen all the time when you're not expecting them. But I'm enormously grateful to be here today with you guys for the opportunity to present a town hall. In our town halls, this is now our 70th town hall that we have. We try to hit about one a month, and we do try to rotate them around our community to make sure that someday something will come near to you. And so we're really grateful to be here. We are also here in a town hall format, which is really deliberate. It's put together so that we focus on specific things with specific specialists and experts on our panel. And we really try to follow a very formalized agenda for lots and lots of different reasons. Unfortunately, I gave up my phone because of the fire alarm, so I'm not going to necessarily know what time it is, but I hope that I'll be able to stay to the schedule. We are very, very lucky to be here at RAC. I've been here quite a few times over the last several years and think that the work that RAC does is remarkable, and the students are equally so. I'm going to spend a little bit of time briefly giving you an update on what's going on in Washington, D.C. For some of you who this is your first town hall, and many of you this is your first town hall, I spend about 3 weeks out of every 4 down in Washington on our behalf, and so there's a lot going on down in D.C. and has been over the last ever, and we'll be able to go over a lot of that today. And then we will go ahead and introduce our panelists to you. And as I mentioned, usually what we try to do with our town hall formats is to focus in on one particular area. And today it's a community resources town hall, and we're specifically going to be focusing in on education, on safety and health issues. And those are the kind of focuses of today's conversation. We will try to preference the questions that are in those areas, but please know that if you have any questions, we will be happy to get back to you either individually or in a one-on-one format if for whatever reason we're not able to get to your questions. And then, of course, we'll have a little bit of closing remarks, and then we'll get out of here so you guys can go on with your lives. Let's go ahead and move to the next slide. Speaking of kind of the format that we have here, we are working really, really hard in our community to make sure that we are part of the solution, and that we are sort of helping to reset the standards of civility and decency in our community. We really think it's important that we as citizens of our community and the Commonwealth and the country can find a way to meet with one another in a space that's good and peaceful, frankly, where we can ask questions of one another and we can get answers from people, but where we don't feel as though we are threatened in any way. So I'm taking a page out of the fact that I at one point was a high school chemistry teacher to take some of the classroom norms that I learned as a teacher to ask of us that while we're here that we treat each other with respect, that we talk about policies and not politics, that we also work to make sure that we're addressing issues that may be conflicting and that may be stressful to us by assuming the best of one another. Everyone here is a patriot. Everyone here loves their country and loves their families. I know it to my core. We just may have different ways of approaching this country and our community. And that's basically what I would ask of all of you. And what I will say is through the 70 town halls that we've really had great fortune and good luck that we've had civility and decency reign. And I think that's really, really important. Next slide, please. You all should have gotten a question card. We really ask that you fill it out. And frankly, even if you don't have a question, because we'd love to get your information and know that you were here so that we can correspond with you guys. If you do fill it out and you do have a question, again, as a teacher and a person with horrible handwriting, please try to make sure that it's legible so that we can get in touch with you, and if you have a question, so that our moderators can read the question. So that would be one thing I would ask of you. As I mentioned, if for whatever reason your question isn't able to be addressed in the time that we have, our team is committed to getting back to you within 48 hours of this town hall, and will absolutely make those phone calls happen. Next slide, please. So now we're going to get into some of the detail of what's going on in Washington and in our community to kind of give everyone a level set of information. Hopefully maybe some of your questions might be answered while we're having this conversation so that you might not have to submit that question. But what I want to do first is kind of define what the 6th Congressional District is. Who are we? What do we look like? To the left is the old Pennsylvania 6th Congressional District, which was the district as of January, changed over to the new 6th Congressional District. And as you can see, it actually didn't change a whole lot. It's all of Chester County, and it's the lower portion of Berks County. And there also is a little bit of a new bump out that you can see in Berks County that has added to the district's landscape. But about 700,000 people or so is what this district represents, and it still is about 700,000 people as we are represented. It's also interesting that this district is roughly speaking 40% Republican, 40% Democrat, and 20% independent. It's one of the very, very rare districts in our country that are purple, and that's what I call myself. I call myself a purple representative, and you purple people. I bring that down to Washington, that sensibility down to Washington when I go. Next slide. I think this is also useful. This is new data as well with the new Pennsylvania 6th Congressional. It may be a little bit hard to see, and it will be available to you guys online if you're not able to see it for some reason. But I think the thing that I want to point out to you on this slide that's most interesting to me is that we are a very well-educated community. So on the left, it talks about how many have no high school diploma, associate degree, graduate degree, high school degree, or bachelor's degree. And we're, for the most part, a very well-educated community. We also are, importantly, I think, hard workers. We have a very, very low unemployment rate here. Remarkably low. And in fact, that creates problems because we don't have enough people to fill all of our jobs in all kinds of ways. And that goes to some of the education experts who are here. We need more people in our pipeline. Next slide, please. This is another chart just of the new Pennsylvania 6 that tells you a lot of information about our average household income and how much our homes are worth and whether we're homeowners or not and what sort of labor force we are. All of that probably too hard to read. But one of the things I want to point out is that 9% of our households are below the poverty level. And 9% of our households don't have internet. There may be a connection there. So that's something that is interesting for me to look at. Another thing is 23% of our households, 23% of our households have somebody in their household who is disabled. And I think that's also something to kind of keep in mind when we think about how we legislate and how we lead. And I think that's really important that I bring to Washington with us. Next slide, please. This is a slide that is relevant to all of us. You are constituents of the 6th Congressional District. My job and the job of the people who are on our team is to serve you in your connection to the federal government. And your connection to the federal government has to do with pretty much anything that is a federal agency. You know, whether it's the IRS or whether it's citizenship and immigration, the Department of State, Medicare and Medicaid services, Social Security services, or the VA, those are all federal things. So if you ever have a question about any of those things, I'm sorry I didn't mention the post office, which is also something that a lot of people have issues with recently in particular. These are the kinds of calls that we accept regularly at our office and that become case study, casework for us. And I think it's really important for you guys to see kind of the way it breaks out in our office. And this has been over time, over the years that I've been in this office. And I think what I most want you guys to see is that the IRS is by far the largest number of case issues that we have. People cannot get the IRS on the phone. They're not getting their taxes back. They are missing returns. They have issues with people taking their social security numbers. And this is a real issue. And so when you hear in the press about legislation that happens to support IRS funding, this is why this is happening. It's really, really important. The technology is antiquated and abysmal. The people are not well staffed. People are retiring from the IRS in large numbers, and we really need help. Our community needs help with the IRS. And you can see where the other things outline there. And please do call if for whatever reason you have issues with any of these areas. Next slide, please. We take, I hope you know, our role as public servants really, really seriously in our office. That's what we are here to do. We are here to serve. And we are also here to run this place like a business. We want to make sure that we return on your investment. We want to make sure that we create a measurable return on your investment. And so to that end, I'm really, really proud that our office has been recognized for some of the most prestigious awards in Washington, D.C. One for constituent services, one for transparency and accountability, and one for the best place to work in Washington. And I'm really, really proud of that, and I'd like to give my team a hand, because many of them are here. Because it's them that do this work, right? It's those guys. I'm just the name on the door, and I'm really, really proud that they have accomplished this work. I will also say that we have returned tens of millions of dollars over the last 5 years. We cost the taxpayers about $1.4 to $1.7 million a year, depending on what year you're talking about. And to have returned tens of millions of dollars over the course of that time is really, I hope, a good return on our investment and something that I think is important. Next slide, please. How am I doing on time, Sue? I'm okay? Okay. So this town hall is supposed to be focusing on a couple of key issues: education, wellness and health, and safety. And we're hoping that we have a great expert panel here to talk to us about that. But what I thought I would do first is briefly talk to you about some of the things that are going on in Washington in these particular areas. I'll begin with education because I think it's not a coincidence that we are here in a hallowed educational institute. We depend on quality education, both as individuals and as a society. Particularly early childhood education is really, really essential. We spent the afternoon with some students here who are focusing on early childhood education and early childhood development, and they are inspirational. Basic literacy and numeracy is something that's essential, and it's the foundation of anybody's ability to be a good citizen. I have spent, as I mentioned, time as an educator. I've also spent time running a nonprofit that focuses on early childhood literacy. In Washington, I'm focused on something that's, I think, relevant for COVID, which is the learning loss that has happened over the course of the pandemic. So I served on the Foreign Affairs Committee until about 3 weeks ago. I've now rotated committees, and I'm now on a couple of other ones, and I can talk about that later. But through the Foreign Affairs Committee, we were able to push through legislation on global learning loss. So, of course, our nation has lost quite a bit in the classroom. We know that that's an acute issue. We are part of a planet. We need to understand how the globe has also reacted to the pandemic and what it is that we can do to address that, and also, frankly, what has worked. Because a lot of things, we innovated on a lot of things globally as a result of being limited to our houses and our classrooms being shut down in many cases. I also recognize that student debt is an enormous issue. We talked about this afternoon with the students. And so in that area, I'm working aggressively to reintroduce a piece of legislation that I introduced last cycle. It's a public service loan forgiveness program. And I think I hope what you'll see in our office is that we're focused a lot on service we're focused a lot on making sure that the people that we elevate the most in our community are the people who are giving back to our community. And so this is a piece of legislation that helps those who are seeking jobs in things like the care economy to be able to have loan forgiveness in as rapidly as possible. This piece of legislation did not pass last cycle. I'm hoping that it will this cycle. If you don't remember your schoolhouse rock, every 2 years, everything gets flushed out of the system and we reintroduce everything back into the system that hasn't passed. So we're doing that now with pieces of legislation like this. Next slide, please. I also am really passionate about engineering and the STEM and STEAM world. I am an engineer by training and by education. And so I'll talk briefly about what's going on in Washington in this area. Our 21st century economy really depends on STEM and STEAM, and I put the A in there really importantly to focus on the arts in addition to science, technology, and math, engineering and math. And this theater is a testament to the importance of the arts. And I consistently advocated here in our community and back in Washington for training in technical schools, for community colleges, for four-year degree institutions. Many of them are here in the audience tonight. And so I've introduced legislation such as the STEM Restart Act, which will help grow our workforce and will help us not only grow the workforce of kids that are getting educated in STEM and STEAM, but help people who have perhaps fallen out of the workforce, moms maybe with backgrounds in STEM and STEAM, to be able to return to the workforce in internships. Lastly, I'll focus on something called the Mathematical and Statistical Modeling Education Act, which is a piece of legislation I've got co-sponsored by another colleague of mine across the aisle, which would innovate on the National Science Foundation curricula to make sure that kids in all grades are being able to use mathematical and statistical modeling in their education, because I think that's something that is not currently in the curricula. This is not to mandate that, it's just to say that we want to explore this and we want to make sure that people in classrooms are able to learn, frankly, the skills that they're going to be asked to do when they get into the real world. Next slide, please. So this town hall will be focused on education and also on safety. And I think it's really important that we focus on safety with our first responders. Police and fire and emergency and medical technicians are those first responders. They need our support very much, just like any other public servant does, and they need the funding that they demand and deserve to meet the needs of our communities right now. Advocating for President Biden's budget over the last couple of years has been my privilege, and he has raised the support and funding for these very important first responders in both of his budgets thus far. I also introduced the bipartisan piece of legislation that's called the Invest to Protect Act. Reading is the 4th largest city in Pennsylvania, but the majority of our police departments in the 6th congressional district are very, very, very small. And those very, very small police departments and fire departments struggle because they compete with larger police and fire departments for resources and for grants and for those sorts of things. And so the Invest to Protect Act came very, very close to passing last Congress. I'm hoping that we'll be able to pass it this Congress. But it really is an effort to make sure that our smallest of small police offices and fire offices are supported in the same way that our larger police offices are. I want very much right now to recognize the law enforcement that are here and those who are in the fire departments as well. I know that we have many of them here today. So thank you very much for your But the other side of the equation is, of course, we want to support our first responders, but we also want to be a safer community. And that has to do with gun safety. Let's go to the next slide. I'm a 3rd generation vet. I served in the Air Force. My father and grandfather in the Navy, my brother in the Army, my cousins in the Navy. I come from a family that very much understands the importance of the Second Amendment and responsible gun ownership. I also have served in a classroom where I walked every day through a metal detector, and my kids have too, in a classroom with every single floor with an armed police officer. And so we really need to not only support and protect the Second Amendment, but also support and protect ourselves at the same time. And there are reasonable compromises that can be made in this area. The very first significant gun legislation that has been passed in 28 years was passed last Congress. And this legislation, it provided increased mental health resources, sensible restrictions for firearm purchases, It increased assistance to police officers and our first responders. I hope that this legislation will be able to help our communities, but there's still more to be done. There's legislation like Ethan's Law, which has now just been reintroduced as well, which requires additional gun safety storage measures, and particularly when minors are in the home. And there's also a piece of legislation called Protecting Our Kids Act, which prohibits the sale of certain semi-automatic weapons to people under 21. Those are the kinds of legislation that I hope that we're able to look at in this particular Congress, which happens in the next 2 years, starting in January. This is a town hall that we held with the topic of safety and gun safety in Chester County. I think we can only really fix these issues if we're willing to talk about them and we're willing to sit together and come to the table together on them. I'm really glad that we were able to pass legislation last Congress, but there still is a lot of work to be done on this. Next slide. This is where we're going to deviate. Am I doing okay for time? Wrap it up. Okay. This is where I'm going to deviate for a little bit and just talk, actually quite briefly, because I do need to move on, about some work that we did in the infant formula area. We actually have an infant formula manufacturer right here in our community in the 6th Congressional, and we've helped quite a bit in that particular case, and also in making sure that there's more infant formula manufacturers. Women's health and reproductive freedom is really an important issue, and not necessarily what we're going to be talking about tonight. Defending LGBTQ rights, very, very important to me as the very proud mom of a gay daughter. Let's move to the next one. Very happy to have passed the Respect for Marriage Act as well, last Congress. We're going to talk briefly about paid family leave. Paid family leave is something that this office has been trying to specialize in. We were able as an office to get paid parental leave through for 2.1 million federal employees. We were also able to consistently standardize paid family leave and parental leave in the military and the armed services. So every service now has 12 weeks. Both men and women both have 12 weeks of leave right now. So that's something that we at our office has been able to accomplish in the last couple of years. And we will continue to work on this issue for the rest of the 75% of our population that doesn't have paid leave. And we have just started a bipartisan working group with 3 Republicans and 3 Democrats to work on this particular issue as well. Next slide. I'm better? Okay. This is important too for me. This is something called the American Rescue Plan, and this is a piece of legislation that was passed by the Congress last session. It was vast and expansive, and it had to do with trying to get us back on our feet from COVID. And I think what's important is you hear about these big, big bills, and you never understand really what happens in our community with that. And this is hoping to be a representation with each of the stars having a number inside of it, of the number of grants of large substance that came to our local libraries, our first responders, our community service organizations, like the Phoenixville Community Service, stormwater upgrades, accessible healthcare, including making sure that we could reestablish healthcare in southern Chester County. I don't know if those of you who follow these things saw, but southern Chester County lost a couple of hospitals over the course of the last couple of years, and some of the American Rescue Plan was the money that was provided to be able to keep one of those open. Next slide, please. This is Berks. So Berks County also has received quite a lot of resources. Reading, as we know, is the 4th largest city and a really important in Pennsylvania and a really important part of our community. Here's what some of these resources were for. School enrichment activities for young people, care for our seniors, restoration for our parks and playgrounds, science centers, workforce development programs. Places like Reading Area Community College and Alvernia University and Albright College all received some of this American Rescue Plan funding. I want to thank the people who were involved at the state and local level, Commissioners Christian Leinbach, Kevin Barnhart, and Michael Rivera, and to the Reading City Council and Mayor Moran for your work on distributing these funds. Sir, I'm grateful to you for sending those funds. But ARPA funds still exist, and we need to continue to make sure that we're bringing more of these resources to our community. Next slide, please. The last thing I think that I'm going to be talking about with you before we transition is something called Community Project Funds. And Community Project Funds is a newer program. It's now in its 2nd year, heading into its 3rd year. Basically what this is a competitive grants program where people in our community submit ideas to a committee of us, that is an independent committee in our office, and we are able to submit a subset of those to Washington to hopefully be supported. And so the first time this was offered, we had about 20 applicants. We were able to put forward 10 of them, and all 10 got the application. 2, 9, right? 60, is that right? Okay. This last time, even more people applied. We were able to put 15 through. 14 of those got the resources to the tune of $10 million. The 15th actually withdrew their application because they got the resources from somewhere else. And so these are the places, and I'm very, very grateful to have some of the organizations who are here. If you are one of these organizations who are here, would you mind standing up to be recognized? I know you're there. Guys who may be in the audience who may have ideas for these kinds of things, to think about this. We believe that this will be a program that will continue to exist in the new year, and so stay on your toes and stay tuned for information about that. I think it's now my turn to transition and to introduce our moderator, President Susan Looney, who already introduced me, but also to introduce our awesome participants. We have the great and powerful Mayor Eddie Moran. And we also have joining him Mr. Bill Hine, who's the city manager, because the mayor needs to leave a little bit earlier. We have Mike Toledo, who is from the Centro Hispano and been a really good support for our Hispanic community and frankly all of Reading. We have Mr. Mike Stauffer from Berks Career and Technology Center, who's the executive director of that organization. And we have Ann Fisher, who's a RN and also the Reading School District Director of Student Services, as our final panelist. So hopefully we have a good, diverse group of people who can answer questions about things like education, things like safety and health. And I hope that you guys have sent in your questions. Our esteemed moderators are sorting your questions, and I will go join the table, and we will be able to answer some of them, hopefully well.
Wonderful, thank you, Chrissy. So, joining me this evening is Mr. Tony DeMarco, Vice President of College Advancement here at RAC. So important that it takes two of us to do this. So we're going to go ahead and start, and I believe I'm going to start with Ann. And then probably, this is something near and dear to Representative Houlihan's heart, but understanding, how do we get Congress to understand and help solve the problems of child care and early care and education?
So, I'd like to ask for some clarification.
Absolutely, I think it's a bigger question of just how do we help solve the problems of child care and the high demand for it and the desperately needed pipeline future teachers.
Sure. Okay, this is a great question. So, the state of Pennsylvania has recently, the state of Pennsylvania has recently enacted some additional graduation requirements, and one of them is internships. So one of the things that we're doing in Reading, at least, is we are having some of our high school students work at the elementary schools to work with the students, elementary school students, to mentor them and teach them some reading skills, some literacy skills, and form relationships with them. So I think that's one way that we can do that. We can tap into younger children, younger adults, and teenagers who don't necessarily know that they like children even, right? And get them to have those experiences with children. When I was young, we babysat. I don't think there's a lot of those opportunities anymore. So I do think that's one way that we can help guide younger teenagers and older teenagers into perhaps exploring that as a career, and then teaching them how to get into college and helping them access those colleges so they understand that early childhood is a viable career. We have a lot of daycares here in the city, but I'm sure they're facing staffing issues as well. But as a school district, we partner with them quite effectively, I think, to help our students and families find a place where the children are safe before school and after school.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Dr. Stauffer to also address that question.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Looney, and I also like to thank you for having us tonight. You know, we have a great partnership, and this is also one that I want to address from Berks Ferry Technology Center perspective. So we have a program in our school that's called Early Childhood Education, and it's a program that is actually hosted at both our East and West campus. It is a very popular program. We are also partnered with RAC through our Teacher Academy program. So while students are in high school, they're earning college credits, and then they transition over to RAC, and they complete their associate's degree, and then it is a seamless transition to Kutztown to earn their bachelor's degree in pre-K to 4 education. So that's just one way that that we're trying to help address that issue as well. I appreciate that partnership with Dr. Linney and RAC.
Thank you very much. And Representative Houlihan?
Yes, and I want to thank the mayor for being able to be here as long as he was able to, and he had other obligations, and I just wanted to say thank you for him coming. From a federal perspective, here's where I'm frustrated, and I feel as though we came very, very close this last Congress to being really innovative in the child care economy, in the care economy. We had the opportunity to focus on more facilities for child care and early childhood learning, and we were not able to get that legislation through. We were also focused on making sure that child care providers were better paid, so that was kind of a public-private partnership, for lack of a better way of describing it. We really need to make sure that it is just as lucrative to work at a child care center as it is to work at the Amazon warehouse, and right now it's not, and I think that's a problem. So we have pipeline issues. We have affordability issues. I was sharing with some of the students today that I went to one child care facility where an entire classroom was shut because they couldn't find another person to populate the classroom to take care of 10 children, and that means that 10 children are not getting an enriching education, and that means that their parents are also not able to work in many cases. This particular child care center is a subsidized one in our Kennett area, which is where our mushrooms grow and are harvested. So the federal government has some ability to be helpful in this area. And those of you guys who are in the audience, I would encourage you to encourage me, to encourage others, to pursue that piece of legislation in the new Congress as well.
Very good. Thank you so much. A really good question, and this is probably first to the mayor's office through Bill Heim, and then maybe to others on the panel, including Mr. Toledo, is how can we pass gun violence legislation to get guns off the street? A big question.
Well, I think the answer there lies in compromise. The representative talked about there are common sense bills that need to be passed that will not infringe on Second Amendment rights, but restore some control to access to guns.
Thank you, Bill. Mike, did you want to jump in on add to that?
I think it's very important for our communities, from the Hispanic Center's perspective, to get more community engagement, to really speak on this issue and how it's affecting the most vulnerable in our community. And I think once we do that, we can get more community engagement and to our local elected officials. Then I think there'll be some momentum for us to maybe see some change. But I think everything starts local. And I think that's important for us to make sure that our voices are collectively heard around our, how we feel around gun violence in our city.
Yeah, it is a major problem that we are all dealing with.
If I could add,
Absolutely,
I
Representative.
don't know if this thing's on.
Hello, are you on? Yeah, there you go. If I could add to that, it is pretty remarkable that we were able to.
Sorry, I think we have an emergent. Do we need to call 911?
Yeah.
Yes, call 911, please. If you're a nurse, absolutely. She's a nurse.
EMTs have been called and they're on their way, and she is being taken care of, and we understand the situation. So we're going to go ahead and continue on, but if anything changes, we will stop at that point in time as well. I was talking about gun safety, and there's only so much, frankly, that the federal government can do because of how difficult this issue is and how different our districts are from one another. It really is important that we locally get engaged and that we talk to our local government and our state government about this issue, because frankly, 40% of us are gun owners. My mother is a gun owner, you know? But we all know that there are reasonable things that reasonable people can agree to. And I think that it is really important that you let your opinion be known. I, as many of you know, am a Democrat. And I was told as a candidate that if I talked about this issue, that I would not be in this office. And I thought it was really important to talk about this issue, because if I don't do it, you know, who will? So I think that that's what I ask of you guys. I think it's really, really important that we not open the paper every single day and see yet another school or yet another church or synagogue. So that's where I would leave that.
Very good. So there's another question. This was probably directed to you, Representative. Based on the recent tragic accident on the Norfolk Southern Railroad, the question is, how will Washington hold rail companies accountable and making sure they are safe?
Is this the railroad that had the toxic chemicals that were not marked?
That's my understanding of the question.
Yeah, I'm just learning about that too, and that greatly disappoints me. These are issues that I need to understand, you know, where the federal government starts and stops, and that's complicated. It's complicated on energy issues in general, and certainly on rail issues too. So if it would be all right, I would like to take that for the record and learn more about kind of where Congress and where the federal government can play on that. But it is fairly nauseating to have learned that those cars were not marked properly.
That's correct. So this question is regarding undocumented individuals. So I'm going to actually initially ask Mike Toledo to address and then maybe go down the line. Just in general, with all the with a number of undocumented residents in the city of Reading, are there any current or potential future legislation that's going to provide a better pathway for undocumented individuals?
Thank you, Dr. Looney. In terms of the work that we're doing at the Hispanic Center, obviously we see, we don't ask questions of folks that come to see us. So in terms of, we do see, we keep track of questions that are coming in as it relates to folks that have questions around residency and what supports, what assistance that it might be provided to help them as it relates to citizenship. So the reality is, we believe that a stronger community is a united community. I think, again, if there are good people in our community that want to come in and work and want to improve quality of life for all in our community, we should do what we can to embrace them. So we will continue to advocate for laws and for support, because we are a country of immigrants. And again, that's where our strength lies. There's more that strengthens us, our differences, than that keep us apart.
This is another one of those issues, a little bit like gun safety, where we really need to just come together and have a hard conversation, but compromise. This is a nation of immigrants. I am the daughter of a refugee. My father survived the Holocaust. He came here as a 5-year-old with his mom, and that was it. And the nation welcomed him, and a generation later, I'm sitting here, which is pretty amazing. But we also, and we have an economy that is really in demand of laborers, skilled and unskilled. In Chester County and Berks County in particular, you can't name me a place that isn't looking for people of one kind or another. And we need to find a way to open our country up for people to be able to continue to have that American dream that my dad was able to have. This is a time where I actually think I have optimism in this particular Congress with the small majority and the small minority that Congress has, there is, I think, the opportunity for there to be compromise on an issue such as difficult as immigration. And so I am working with a group called the Problem Solvers, and that's a group of 56 Republicans and Democrats equally divided on this kind of issue, and hoping that we'll be able to put forward suggested legislation that then will also be interesting to the Senate, because remember, it has to happen in both places. So we need to make sure that we are a nation of laws and we are a nation of borders, and all of those things are very, very important, but we are also a nation of compassion and empathy, and we need to make sure that we continue to lead with those values and continue to welcome people in the nation.
So I can give you a different perspective. Most of you probably know, before I became city manager, I was a police officer and a police chief for about 42 years. And there is really no correlation between being an undocumented immigrant and committing a crime. In fact, most of the people we have in the city of Reading that may be undocumented are hard workers. Like the representative said, they're doing jobs that we need done, and are not committing crimes or are not a threat to public safety. In fact, the police department does not ask questions about it. They don't care what your status is. They treat everybody the same.
Thank you. Dr. Stauffer? Okay. We will move on to the next question. This is regarding substance abuse. And it's a very generic question, but how do we help the substance abuse problem locally, but also on a larger national level? And we'll start with Dr. Stauffer at that end.
Absolutely, thank you, Dr. Looney. Excuse me. So this is, certainly something, working as an executive director of the school, and I've, been in the role of a teacher, assistant principal, curriculum director, building principal. Certainly something that concerns us greatly. When we're looking at this, from even a mental health perspective, I think, certainly falls in line with some of that. That is certainly something that we have definitely in recent years has certainly been a focus for us to really work on. In fact, we just received word today that we were able to receive quite a substantial grant that is going to be focused towards mental health and addressing some of the needs of our students and our staff within our school. So I think as we continue to do that and continue to build upon that, knowing that it's not a one-size-fits-all, a once and done type of strategy, but that we're in this for the long haul, and really to address that, I think is going to be really important and key for us in addressing those pieces.
Great, thank you, Dr. Stauffer. Bill, any comments on the substance abuse issues?
I think treatment. I know from learning and from experience that it takes a while and it takes multiple times before you're able to really permanently take care of this kind of addiction problems. I have a close relative that had addiction to alcohol and went through several times of arrest and several times being in rehab. And the third time in this case was the charm. And the person is now sober and very productive. And it's not a thing that you can keep making arrest. It's something that we have to get people into serious treatment and counseling.
Thank you. Representative Hooligan?
Yes, mental health, I think, is an aspect of this, making sure that people aren't self-treating issues that should be treated in other ways. I think empathy and compassion and recognition that people don't want to be addicted, that this is something that is a disease and needs to be dealt with as such, but also supply issues. We need to recognize that the supply of things like fentanyl is real, and that it's coming from places that would wish us harm. I'm going to be very specific, China. And so I think this is one of the things that Democrats and Republicans have the opportunity to work together on in the new Congress. We have a new committee, a temporary committee that's on China and the influence of China and what we can be doing to be aware of where China stands on the world stage. And I think that this is an opportunity to work bipartisanly and to try to find a way not only to work on these issues of things like fentanyl and fentanyl supplies and COVID and all the other things, but if we behave like grown-ups, we have an opportunity to really make a difference in our national security. It remains to be seen whether or not we will be able to behave like grown-ups in Washington, but that is something that has a good opportunity.
Thank you. This actually is an excellent question back to Dr. Stauffer, but really to the entire panel. And how do we direct more young people to consider a trade or a workforce position?
Well, that's a fantastic question. Thank you, whoever asked that one. So I will tell you, I think, I've been on, both sides of education. I've been at, one of our sending schools, I've been at the CTC, and what I can tell you is the students that are graduating from any one of our CTCs, whether it's the Berks Career Technology Center or Reading Muhlenberg Career Technology Center, those students are leaving with a lot of options. Those students are leaving with the option to continue at a 2 or 4 year college, and many of our students and many of Reading Muhlenberg students do that. They are leaving with the option of continuing with an employer because many of them are going to be given co-op opportunities during their senior year, and most of that often transitions right into a job right out of high school. Some of them are even finding out what they don't want to do, and honestly, I think that's just as important as knowing what you do want to do for a high school student. I was much older when I found out what I really truly wanted to do. I loved working with my hands, I loved being outside. I was a carpenter for 15 years, and I stumbled into coaching football and realized that I absolutely just loved working with youth, and that led me into education. But that wasn't an experience that I had when I was in high school, and I think the opportunities that we can give students at a younger age is incredibly important. Tomorrow night, we'll be hosting in Leesport an open house that is geared towards middle school students and for our 16 sending schools to open their eyes to the opportunities that the Career Center can give them. The other important piece to realize is, the Career Center these days is not the VOTEC that I grew up with and when I was in high school. We have programs where, like our sports medicine and rehabilitation program, our dental occupations program, we have a medical health professions program that is leading students. Traditionally, those students are they're becoming doctors, nurse practitioners. Some of the folks that are going to be the top of their field are coming through our buildings. So I think just opening up their eyes, exposing them at a younger age. We do employ an individual who is an outreach coordinator, and her sole job is to get down all the way down to 2nd and 3rd grade. And our teachers will go out and do presentations to those classes and talk about the different careers that are available to them. And then that continues to middle school and always into high school. But again, the more that we can open up their eyes and realize that there are many, many opportunities, and it's no longer a one-size-fits-all. College is not the only option. It's a fantastic option, but not the only option. And getting students to understand that it's okay to do what they want to do and what they're passionate about.
Very good, thank you. And Anne, representing Reading School District, would you like to answer or comment on that question as well concerning a trade or workforce position?
Certainly. So one of the things, in addition to robustly recruiting students to go to the RMCTC, again, we are really focusing on those internships for students who opt not to go to the CTC. So we have internships with Reading Hospital and St. Joe's, and they're pretty competitive, and we send about 30 students each year to paid internships at those institutions. We are looking at internships at other companies as well, knowing that they need our students. Our students are largely bilingual, and they are attractive. We're looking at starting internships and programs for students who can go into the medical field as translators, because that's such a need in our community. So we're exploring a lot of opportunities and developing those internships, even within our district, with food services and our business office and our safe schools officers and the teaching program that I mentioned before. So there are a lot of opportunities, because we know that outside of the school walls is where our students can really become engaged, and they see a world that's not available to them just inside Reading High School.
I cannot agree more on all of those comments. Would anyone else on the panel like to address that question?
At the federal level, there's stuff that can be done as well, and we're working to make those things happen. There was a very large piece of legislation that was an apprenticeship act that made it through the House and didn't have the support in the Senate that it needed to be able to pass. I think apprenticeships are really important. and there's, some controversy over how you roll them out and who rolls them out. The reality is they need to exist. And I think the other thing the federal government can be doing to be helpful is recognizing that, as you mentioned, not everybody's solution is a four-year degree. And the way that we incentivize people to do that has to do with things like Pell grants that allow people to pursue the trades and not necessarily to go to a four-year college. And I think that that's work that we have been working on and can be done. The last thing I would say, though, is we have responsibility too. We as people who live in Berks and Chester County, we're parents. And we're the people who raise our kids and who need to expose our kids to all of the things, right? All of the things that they can possibly do. And that needs to include things like the trades. Sometimes when I visit with schools, with school administrators, with superintendents, the pushback is coming from the parents. The parents are the ones who say they don't want, people recruiting their kids from, whatever sort of thing that's not a four-year college. When I was an educator, the high school I taught at was Simon Gratz. The year that I was there, they tore out all of the, med tech and all of the vo-tech kind of stuff because they believed that their theory of change was that every child needed a four-year degree. So we have responsibility too.
Very good. Anyone else on the panel? Bill?
So our mayor created a summer program, paid internships for high school students to work with our city public works, our tradesmen, our water treatment plant people, so they could get an idea of how they could put that kind of education to work. And currently, we can't fill all the positions that we have open in the city. Some of the workforce is ready to retire, and we're struggling to find people to replace them. So we definitely need tradesmen.
That certainly is an issue throughout. So I only have time for 2 more questions. So one of them, and this is to Representative Houlihan. The question is, how do you apply for community impact funds?
Okay, so I'm not 100% sure that it will happen again, although there is some commitment and appetite for them to continue on in the new Congress, in the 118th Congress. My guess is that we will get very little notice on when that aperture opens, when we have the opportunity to apply. I don't know yet whether there will be changes to what it is that we're looking for in projects, how big they are, how many will be funded. And what I'm encouraging of you all to do is, if you have an idea that's similar to some of the ones that you've seen up there, that you start to work now. You can take a look at our website. There's a little bit of a link there that shows you some of the processes on an application. Because my guess is we'll get kind of a few weeks notice, and that we'll have a tight timeline to turn it around. Our office runs a very tight process that is populated by independent community members who come together separate from our office and evaluate whatever applications we get. They make recommendations to us. We choose from those recommendations. And so it's a pretty rigorous rubric that everybody's run through that I would encourage you to kind of take a look at the kind of people and organizations that were accepted. You'll see that it's geographically spread out. You'll see that it's got a different kinds of projects. But I'm hopeful that we'll be able to have this program again, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to have the same kind of success that we've had in the past.
Okay. Do I have time for one more question? And this really goes to probably everyone on the panel because it's much more of a localized question. How do we increase funding to the Reading School District? I asked, so.
Well, I guess it helps that the Secretary of Education is a former school superintendent of schools, and Dr. Ramin. I just think everything really truly starts local. I think if the community can come together and make the case for a community-led education agenda that's going to lift our children up, and then the school board then takes it from there. I think we have to start focusing on the bottom up in terms of our local community and taking it up versus depending on the federal government to help. We all have a role to play. We just got to figure out what that role is and how we can work together to make that happen.
That really has been the theme of this evening, the idea of working together, and all of us from local to national to federal really the answer to so many of the questions that all of you have asked. So I personally thank you for asking the questions this evening. I hope I did a good job moderating. And I believe I'm going to turn it over back to you.
This is the time when I get to say thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to serve our community. We take this really seriously. I hope that you've seen that. And we would welcome you to come to any of our subsequent town halls. I'm sure that Sue, my district director, already has one scheduled for the next time. And I don't see my team in here because some of them I see. I'd like to acknowledge Tasha and Scott, and can't see you back there. Andrew, your face is blocked. I have a team that's amazing and remarkable, and most of what we do is individual constituent services. So please do reach out to us if you'd like us to help you, or if you'd like us to visit your business, et cetera, et cetera. Thank you once again. Please enjoy your evening and get home safely.